The modification to that famous scene sets the tone perfectly for the story which we're going to dive into today. This is the story of how David valiantly stood against Goliath and subsequently got face crushed into oblivion. This is the story of how Amazon gutted an entire industry. Chapter 1: Why the Book Industry. By offering over 1 million titles, an online retailer could excel on selection. By being open 24/7 and aiming to ship books directly to the customers as quickly as possible, it could score high on convenience, and by discounting a substantial proportion of its titles, it could compete against the superstores on price. During the mid to late 1990s, no one had yet figured out how to commodify the internet. It was a simpler time, where search engines had yet to be established as a thing, and homebrew websites with no business model were being valued higher than some large corporations. Everyone knew the internet was revolutionary, but no one had yet cracked the code on how revolutionary it could be. So, one company set to work specifically on cracking this code. The initial result that this brain trust came up with was the above concept. Completely revolutionary at the time. Convenience in being able to navigate through a large product catalog was the initial breakthrough for commoditization of the internet. It's what the internet could do better than physical stores. eBay, one of the early brainchildren of this era, also came into existence by following a similar model. Uber now is based on the same concept. Disrupt industries that play specifically to the strengths offered by the internet compared to physical models, then monopolize the new industry that's created. Netflix is a good example of the market fixing these problems as they occur naturally. For a short while, Netflix did indeed monopolize the new market that they'd created, but in order to merely exist, they had to play ball with other sharks. Slowly, the other sharks all made their plays, and now they're all currently engaged in attacking each other over territory. What if there was an industry, though, not already dominated by sharks? We look at the disruption concept now as just a given and a fact of life. Everyone knows of and has heard of this concept. Let's go back to the time, though, when this concept was first invented. Everyone is sitting around trying to figure out how to commodify the internet. Suddenly, someone has the brilliant idea that disruption and monopolization is the answer. After everyone finishes patting themselves on the back, they realize that there's a secondary problem. What industry specifically do you disrupt? Remember, this concept had never been thought of specifically up until this point. You now have the perfect idea. The world is your oyster, and you can pick the perfect industry. There's so many industries, though. Which one is the one that you should choose? Initially, a list of 5 industries was created: compact discs, computer hardware, computer software, videos, and books. After careful debate, it was decided that books would be the industry that Goliath would focus on. Why exactly the book industry, though? For a few key reasons that made it the absolute perfect industry to test the disruption model on. Reason number 1. Under the model, the more choices a consumer is faced with, the greater advantage online sales have over in-person sales. No other industry has more active SKUs than books. 2. No sharks in new books. The 3 big national booksellers at the time, those being Barnes & Noble, Borders, and Walden Books, were taking business from mom and pops, but none were ever strong enough, even at their peak, to wipe out smaller players entirely. It was one of those rare industries that lacked a true giant. 3. No one controlled distribution of the used book market. There was no national distribution model or buying network for used books at the time, period. Not a single large corporation in the whole entire used book chain. These factors combined made the book industry the perfect target to wage war against. Chapter 2: Armageddon. July 1995 is when Doomsday began. Up until this point, no one had cornered the national bookselling market, let alone thought about the international market. Within its first month of existence, Amazon made sales in all 50 states and 45 countries around the world. They lapped an entire industry within a month. Any true war strategist, though, knows that an initial victory does not mean that the war is won. even if that victory is a crushing one. The one way to truly ensure victory is to utterly annihilate the competition. Burn them to ashes, then burn the ashes so that there's no foundation whatsoever for anyone to rebuild upon. Amazon's strategy to tackle this problem was simple. It would lose money for 5 years and focus purely on accumulating as much cash as inhumanly possible. Dump absolutely everything from jump into absolute focus on destroying your enemies. Let's break down a few key concepts here. 1. Amazon at this time was essentially the largest think tank of the greatest business minds and Harvard MBAs that was ever assembled, all with a singular motive and directive, all against a group of liberal arts graduates who definitely did not have degrees from Harvard and who cared more about books than business. It's possible that some of them had USC degrees, but they definitely did not have think tanks. 2. Amazon entered into this market with the full expectation that they would lose money for 5 years. They were successful in selling this vision and basically gained access to unlimited amounts of cash. If anyone had enough brains to launch a counterattack against this assault, they would have had to survive being bled out for 5 years. 3. Amazon's initial business model wasn't to actually own books. They were initially a book broker. They never actually bought the books. They matched buyers with sellers. Barnes & Noble tried to sue them when they went public over this fact. Margins in the book industry were thin as it is. Amazon came in and stripped out all extraneous costs from the process while competing with the above two advantages. The book industry never stood a chance. Chapter 3. The Aftermath. We're now 25 years removed from Amazon's initial invasion, and the book industry has yet to recover in any meaningful way. A few regional powerhouses have found ways to grow in this era, but they're few and far between, and they're definitely the exception as opposed to the rule. The average bookseller meets a much different fate in today's climate: bankruptcy within 2 years. There was an online used bookseller that happened to carve out a niche and compete alongside Amazon virtually from the beginning. A Books was created in 1996 to focus on the Amazon model, but strictly for valuable antique books. Amazon acquired them in 2008, I think solely as a way to put the final sword in their initial biggest foe. Amazon's strategy at the time was purely focused on diversifying away from books. It was a luxury acquisition for them. Meanwhile, the industry that Amazon destroyed has found a way to survive, but it's taken on a very different and unique form. The used book market is no longer an industry, it's a community. Social media sites are the main trading and buying and selling platforms for used book enthusiasts. You wouldn't even know that they exist unless you're a part of the club. Like a band of refugees that has struggled to subsist and cling to their old ways of life before the empire invaded, the book community is very close-knit and very weary of outsiders and newcomers. Anyone who tries to enter the industry with a profit as their primary motive is instantly shunned. It's accepted that these are just how things are now, and how they'll always be.